Starfire Warlock, Hoyle Titan, and Gerfalcon Hunter have dominated endgame content for quite some time now, and when Strand released on Tuesday, it was met with mixed reviews from the community. It was fun, but the other aspects of the subclass felt pretty underwhelming, and it was tough to see how they could compete with Light 3.0. The cooldowns felt harsh, especially coming out of the Strand-empowered campaign, and it just didn't seem to have that wow factor outside of its movement. And due to this community feedback, Bungie actually released the remaining fragments early, and I can confidently say that that was the right decision because they make a massive difference in the power fantasy of these subclasses. Today, I'll be showcasing one of the craziest control builds I have ever used in Destiny because the Threadrunner Hunter is a master of puppets, and I'll be showcasing how you can unlock the full potential of Strand. I'm Above, and if you enjoyed today's video, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. Now, let's get into it. First up, we have Silkstrike. Now, this is obviously the only super we have available to us, but it is a very good one nonetheless. This may seem like an ad clear super at first glance, but I promise you guys, by spamming left click, the light attack of this super, the damage is absolutely mind-boggling against nearly every boss in the game, to the point where I'm pretty positive that it's bugged, especially with Star Eater scales, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see it get disabled before the day 1 raid on March 10th, which is why I'm not going to recommend it as a core element of this build, because after all, I don't want to recommend something to you guys only to not have you be able to use it. So anyways, Silkstrike is a massive part of this subclass and can do some insane DPS work for you and your fire team. Next up, we have Marksman's Dodge, and the reason I went with Marksman's Dodge is because you don't really need the melee. I don't find it to be that strong. The Threaded Spike, even though it reduces outgoing damage from your opponents, I find it very inconsistent in terms of getting the Strand melee to come back to you, and it just doesn't do that much damage overall. I don't find it to be a key part of this kit, but you can obviously go with Gambler's Dodge if you would like. And last but not least, out of our abilities, we have the Shackle Grenade. I know it's super fun to play with the grapple, and you guys can do that all you'd like, but I'm telling you, the Shackle Grenade is easily the strongest option here. The AoE on this grenade is insane, and even works on threatening enemies such as champions and tormentors, which trivializes them entirely. And because of the aspect I'm about to cover, you end up with 2 of them, making this one of the strongest subclasses in all of Destiny 2. The fact that you can actually suspend an opponent for a base of 8 seconds per shackle grenade, on top of having a dodge ability that can suspend enemies as well, you become the master puppeteer power fantasy that you've always wanted in a video game. As for our aspects, we only have 2 available at the moment, the first of which is Widow's Silk, where you gain an additional grenade charge, as I just mentioned, and your grapple creates a grapple tangle at the grapple point. The second aspect that we're going to be talking about today is Ensnaring Slam, where activating your air move to consume your class ability and dive to the ground suspends all nearby targets on impact and uses your dodge charge. These 2 combined, having 3 ways off the bat by default to suspend enemies, is so incredibly powerful. You guys can see in the background, I'm in the solo legend campaign 20 under power, and it just makes the entire experience a cakewalk. You can just throw your grenade here, dodge here, throw another grenade, and all of a sudden the entire room is suspended, and this is all thanks to our fragment, Thread of Continuity, where suspend, unravel, and sever effects applied to targets have an increased duration. This takes the base suspend mechanic of 8 seconds and increases it to 12 seconds for a 50% buff on this effect. 12 seconds in an in-game setting is an incredibly long time, and this level of control is unbelievably powerful. The next fragment that we used was Thread of Generation, where dealing damage generates grenade energy, and this synergizes so well with the suspend mechanic because if enemies can't shoot back, you're able to just lay a ton of damage into your opponents and get a massive portion of your grenade energy back. We also used Thread of Mind, where defeating suspended targets targets grants class ability energy, so as you're shooting them, you get grenade energy, and as you defeat them, you get class ability energy as well, both of which are ways that we're able to suspend enemies even more in the future. You can start to see the synergy here and why this build is so powerful. And last up, we have our key to survivability in Threat of Warding, where picking up an Orb of Power grants Woven Mail. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what Woven Mail does, this is a 60% damage resist for 10 seconds that can be infinitely refreshed when picking up Orbs of Power. We'll be pairing this with some other incredibly powerful artifact mods that you'll see in a minute, but as you can already see, the fact that we're able to increase the duration of our suspend, get energy back on both our grenade and our dodge abilities while shooting enemies that are suspended, and then capitalize off of the orbs that we create to gain even more damage resist, this build really starts to come together, and we haven't even discussed artifact or armor mods just yet. As we make our way to the character in Spec Screen, there are 3 stats that take priority for me. The first is Resilience, which at tier 10 grants a 30% damage resist, and though this is a 10% nerf from last season, it is still by far the most important stat inside of PVE. Next up, we have Mobility, which reduces the cooldown of your dodge, and in this case, will allow us to use our Ensnaring Slam as often as possible, and we'll be pairing this with a High Discipline stat to ensure that we have our Shackle Grenade on cooldown as often as we possibly can. As we make our way to the artifact, there are a couple mods that I want to highlight that make this build even better. The first of which is Authorized Mods Void and Authorized Mods Grenades. These two reduce the cost of all Void weapon mods and any grenade mods that we'll be using in our build as well. We'll be pairing this with Volatile Flow, where picking up an Orb of Power grants your Void weapons volatile rounds, as well as Bricks from Beyond, where defeating a powerful combatant with a Void heavy weapon has a chance to generate heavy ammo for you and your teammates. This, combined with other mods on our armor that I'll be talking about later, ensures that we'll never be short on heavy ammo. And we'll also be pairing this with Shatter Orbs, where the first time you break a combatant's shield, you create an Orb of Power if you break that shield with a matching damage type. Lucky for us, the Cabal and Vex have so many Void shields that we're constantly generating extra Orbs of Power simply by using our Void weapons. There are currently just 7 Strand weapons in the game at the moment, and we don't have access to that many, which is why I didn't do a massive focus on these Strand specific perks in the artifact this time around. But that also means that this build has potential to be even stronger later in the season, where you can use things like Untangler, Allied Unraveling, Counterweave, and even Threaded Blast to make this build even better. Weapons are totally personal preference, but to take advantage of Volatile Flow, I went with Funnel Web in my energy slot and the brand new Regnant Grenade Launcher in the heavy slot. Feel free to use any Void weapon of your choice. I highly recommend going with something like Repulsor Brace that takes this build to the next level. When you combine this with Volatile Flow, Woven Mail and Repulsor Brace make you virtually unkillable, especially when you're suspending enemies as often as we are in this video. As we move into armor mods, on my helmet I went with Void Siphon, as we'll be rocking Void weapons today. I also went with Heavy Ammo Scout and Heavy Ammo Finder to ensure that we never have a shortage of heavy ammo for our heavy grenade launcher. On my gauntlets I went with Double Bolstering Detonation, which grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a grenade. And I also went with a Void Loader because, as I mentioned, we'll be featuring Void weapons throughout this video. These are all just 1 point thanks to our Void Authorized mod. On my chest piece I went with Charged Up to ensure that we're getting as many armor charges as possible every time we pick up an orb, as well as a couple different resists. I went with Arc and Solar because the Cabal primarily shoot these damage types, but you can also swap this out for a concussive dampener if you'd like, depending on how much extra energy you have. On the boots, I went with 2 Void Weapon Surge mods, which essentially replaces Font of Might, where each time we pick up an Orb of Power, we get a damage bonus to our weapons for a short period of time. Instead of using a 3rd Void Weapon Surge, I don't think it's super necessary outside of DPS phases, so I opted for a Recuperation mod that replenishes health every time we pick up an Orb of Power. And on the class item, I went with a Double Bomber mod, which reduces grenade cooldowns when using your class ability, ability, which we'll be doing constantly with our ensnaring slam, and I also went with distribution, which reduces all ability cooldowns when using your class ability near targets, which we'll be doing repeatedly with our ensnaring slam. These three mods synergize so well with our suspend abilities that they are no-brainers on the class item. So to recap, we'll be generating orbs of power using Void Siphon, as well as shatter orbs, where every time we break a matching shield, it will generate orbs as well. And each time we pick up an orb of power, we'll take advantage of Volatile Flow, Woven Mail for 60% damage resist, Recuperation for an instant heal, and Void Weapon Surge for a 17% damage bonus to our Void weapons. Pair this with Charged Up, and we're getting double the armor charges every single time we pick up an orb of power. As I mentioned earlier, Star Eaters are incredibly strong with this super at the moment, but I do believe that it's bugged based on reports from several top tier players, so I wouldn't rely on this exotic at the moment, because as you can see in the background, I'm able to solo the first prophecy boss in about 10 seconds. We 3-manned Riven with this super using nothing else for damage, which is pretty insane. So with that said, I would lean on things like 6 Coyote personally. This exotic grants you an extra dodge, which means you always have 2 grenades and 2 dodges available to you, which means we have 4 ways to suspend enemies at all times. And by the time we use all of them, we likely have some of our cooldowns back regardless. If you're not a big fan of the 6 Coyote, another option are the Frosties, which will also do a great job regenning your abilities. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. You can also catch me live on Twitch over at twitch.tv/above, where we'll be doing a ton of build crafting all season long. And don't forget, I'll have the dim link to this build linked down in the description below. With all of that said, I'm Above. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.